It was, as always, the same nightmare for Matthew. As young 18-year-old boys, they were sent off to war in Vietnam. That's the distinct taste of white, squeaky, vicious dust on their teeth, and intolerable burning sun in that unfamiliar, hostile, and incomprehensible country. And the clammy fear with the uncertainty creeps into every cell of his body. The platoon leader leads his fighters, encouraging them. "Don't be afraid. We'll show them how to fight." They believed him, followed him as they ran into a minefield. Their opponents met them with heavy fire from advantageous positions. Matthew's last memory was of a flash as bright as lightning, and pain tearing his body into 1,000 pieces. The man screamed out in hellish, unbearable pain and woke up, broken by cold sweat. "God, it's so stiff in my heel, and my leg is aching. I can't bear it," he thought, and threw back the blanket. He was again confronted with a terrible reality of no foot, only a bandaged stump sticking out above his knee. He clenched his teeth until they ached and gnashed, and held back from howling in despair as other wounded men dozed beside him. A tear rolled down his prickly, unshaven cheek treacherously. Then the soldier wiped it away with his sleeve quickly, before anyone could see him. The one kindred spirit that awaited him in civilian life was his fiancée Bertha. While Matthew was in the hospital, she wrote him touching letters, as she worried and supported him. Matthew never decided to tell her about his injury. He sincerely hoped that she loved him and would accept him. 2 years ago, just before the army, Matthew lost his parents in an avalanche that tragically took their lives in the mountains. Nevertheless, even though they were experienced geologists, the mountains took them away forever. Starting from that moment, something of terrible fate and a succession of misfortunes seemed to hang over him. As soon as he returned home, the first thing he did was go to his Bertha. He shaved, put on his uniform with awards, and bought the most expensive bouquet of flowers and rang the doorbell with a sinking heart. Her darling came out the door, looking all grown up with a fancy haircut, and stared dazedly at his crutches and the twisted-up empty pant leg. He took her in his arms, hugged and kissed her, and couldn't look at her. But she remained still, then asked quietly, "Matthew, do you have no leg at all?" "Yes, I've been through a bloody war." "Never mind, I'm strong. They promised me a prosthesis. They gave me a medal for bravery. You wouldn't leave me for that, would you?" he asked anxiously, striving to understand everything in her eyes. At this, Bertha took them aside, stepped out of the embrace, and with a snapping voice said the most frightening words to our hero that he dreaded to hear the most of all. "Wait, Matthew, listen to me. I can't do this. Well, I'm young. I want a family. I want kids. What about you? You're a cripple for life. What kind of family are you gonna have? You've got to be taken care of. Don't come here again. Don't." She pushed the door shut. He thumped the door with his fist in anger and shouted, "How can you do this? You said you loved me, that you would wait for me. But what about in grief and happiness? I never thought you were like this." At the scream, Bertha's mother ran out, took stock of the situation, and reacted quickly. "Bertha, go inside. Now, Matthew, listen to what I have to say. I feel sorry for you, of course, but it's not Bertha's fault what happened. What are you condemning her to? How's she gonna be with a useless cripple for the rest of her life? Don't destroy her life. Go away." And she shut the door violently. It was a terrible betrayal from which Matthew never recovered. It was the final straw of his already difficult fate. Matthew was also treated with indifference at the Veterans Council. He was given a prosthesis, a small flat, but his parents' flat had to be sold after their death, and it was all spent on searching and funeral expenses. His pension was paid, of course, but they couldn't help him with a job. They just looked around. "You know, Matthew, you've done your time. This is the time. There's no place for the healthy. Where are we going to find a place for you?" In an instant, a war veteran and hero, as well as a young and healthy man, turned into a cripple and a scum of the society that no one cares about. Matthew couldn't take it anymore and lost his temper, and out of grief and hopelessness, he drank himself to death. The years passed quickly, almost half of which he did not remember in his drunken rage. Matthew gave up on himself, didn't shave, fell into disrepair, and spends every day at the railway station near the cafe. He frequently helped the saleswoman Judith carrying boxes and sacks. The uncomfortable prosthesis helped a lot. She felt sorry for the man, gave him food whenever possible, loved to talk to him about life. And of course, he understood from his honest and sad eyes that he was not a scoundrel, not a criminal or a drunkard, but simply a man with a broken and complicated fate. A person who feeds his last crumbs to all the cats and dogs around him could not be bad. It was the end of February. A very little boy of about 6, dressed in an oversized, soiled sweatshirt with the sleeves rolled up 3 times and rubber boots, came running up to Matthew in the severe cold. The boy wiped his sniffling nose with his sleeve and whimpered, holding out his skinny hand. "But please give me some bread. I've had a rumbling in my stomach since yesterday." Matthew took a slice of a loaf and gave it to the kids. "How come you're here, a little boy, and naked? Where are your parents?" he asked. Then the boy ate his loaf eagerly and said, "I ran away. My mother died recently. In spite of the fact that she was away a lot, she loved me and didn't hurt me. She called me Bunny. But my stepfather was a bastard. He used to beat me hard, make me beg for money, and he used to buy alcohol. I hate drunkards, and I'm warming myself on the heating pipe. Please don't report me to the police, Uncle, because all the same, I'll run away from the orphanage." There was a twitch and a change in the man's soul, hardened by the years of wandering. First, he wanted to take the boy back to his flat. He would be lost in the street. He was coughing away. But then he suddenly remembered how dirty his house was, dusty and full of bottles, just to bring this child home. Then he bought sweet hot tea and a cabbage pie for the little one, put his coat over him and said, "Let's make a deal. Come here tomorrow and I'll make something up, because we can't get lost together. My name is Matthew." "I'm Hugo." "All right, I'll come." At this time, the man was in a rush to his own den. It was the first time in all these years that he had not bought alcohol and did not want to drink. He started cleaning and then did the laundry, made fresh soup, washed a mountain of dried up dishes. So the place was looking quite passable. The next day, Matthew came to the station first thing in the morning like a bayonet. He waited until lunchtime. There was still no sign of the boy. So he worried and asked around the tradesmen and local movers, who suggested where the boy was sleeping on a heating pipe. An anxious man went there. On a pile of old rags and cardboard covered by his coat was laying Hugo. "Do you feel sick, boy?" And Matthew touched the boy's head, which was very hot. But the boy didn't answer. He was delirious. There was no time to think or decide, so Matthew wrapped the boy in his jacket and rushed to Edith in the cafe, calling to the woman. "Judith, come here. I need your help. There's a little boy dying." "Oh, poor baby. He must have caught a cold. It's freezing. We should call an ambulance or take him to the local children's hospital," the woman wailed. "You can't put him in a hospital. He escaped from his abusive stepfather. They take him straight to the orphanage, and Hugo pleaded with me not to turn him in," Matthew lamented. "Here's what. You take the boy home, get him warm, and I'll go to the nurse I know. She's a trusted person. She'll keep quiet," the woman commanded. With joint efforts, they managed to get the boy out. The fever had declined, appetite appears, and Hugo began to recover. In the meantime, Matthew had become so attached to the boy, looked after him with care, bought him some clothes and food with his pension, and even a small set of soldiers. They laughed, played war games, and the boy asked Matthew repeatedly, looking into his eyes like a faithful puppy, "You're not going to leave me, are you? I want to live with you. You're like my father." He had a lump in his throat and a warmth in his heart, so he hugged Hugo and reassured him. "I won't give you up to anyone. I can't be alone now." Matthew didn't even mention drinking. Instead, he got a reason for life and a desire to get out of bed in the morning. What a boy's breakfast should be prepared. He started to think about getting custody of the boy. He visited the social services, asked the Veterans Council for a reference. Everyone kept telling him in one voice, "You are an unemployed disabled person. So how are you going to provide for your child on a meager pension? If you got married and got a job, it would be possible to think about it." Matthew took a chance. For a long time, he liked Judith, and she was unmarried, childless, hard on her own. She was a kind woman, a housewife, nothing if she looked unsightly. He wasn't handsome either, and he was one-legged. The man got dressed up, shaved, bought a potted violet, and rushed over to her shop. Judith was surprised and didn't know what it was at first. She'd never seen Matthew like that. Fresh, cheerful, his eyes lit up. She even admired him. The man didn't try to be cute. He just told it like it was. "Judith, I've got something serious to tell you. I want to adopt Hugo. They said I had to get married. I've been fond of you for a long time. How about we get married? I haven't been drinking for a long time. I'll help you, keep you safe. Besides, I'll be good for the household. I can do woodwork and chop wood. And Hugo is a good boy. You'll get along well. I feel sorry for the boy. He'll be lost. I'm attached to him, you know." And he looked at the woman pleadingly. Judith burst into laughter. It shattered Matthew, remembering Bertha and her taunts, and he was mentally scolding himself for doing it. Who needed him? The poor cripple. Then, the woman finally calmed down, stopped laughing, and took the violet. "You amaze me. Who makes a proposal like that? It's obvious you're a soldier. Give me the flower, groom. I agree. I've never dreamt of having a family, and here's a husband and a son at once. In the evening, I want to whine from loneliness and boredom. I don't have anyone to talk to share it with. We'll raise Hugo. He'll be no worse than anyone else." Matthew lit up and, in a burst of emotion, hugged his wife-to-be awkwardly. They married, moved in with Judith, who had a larger private house. They started a household, tidied up the garden. She got her husband a job as a loader in the cafe. Matthew's little flat was rented to a student for cheap. Eventually, they managed to get custody of Hugo after 7 rounds of bureaucratic nightmare. At first, the neighbors scoffed at the woman, arguing that she was desperate for a cripple and had taken in someone else's child. Who knows what he would grow up to be? When they said how well they were doing, they were even jealous because the man was good looking and did not drink, and his limp was hardly noticeable. Things were slowly getting better. Matthew and Judith lived in love, and they were both in their 40s. They were not of an age to be squabbling, and they had both had enough trouble in their lives. Thus, they valued the simple pleasures of ordinary life, drinking tea together, caring for and supporting each other, because that was a novelty for both of them. Hugo went to school, performed well, proved bright, and pleased his parents with good grades. There was one disappointing thing. His peers bullied him a lot, hurting him a lot, shouting angrily, "Ha ha, you son of a cripple and a bum! Do not make friends with him." And they treated him with contempt. The boy got angry and fist-pumped the offenders. "My daddy is not a bum. He is a hero. He was in the war, and you are all fools." He stood up for his father's honor. Matthew tried to calm the situation down as best he could. "Son, don't mind them. They're stupid, heartless. Just remember that your mother and I love you, and we will not let anyone hurt you. When you grow up, you will become a lawyer or a judge, just as you dream, and you will do what is right." The years of school passed quickly and the last bell rang. Matthew was tinkering in the garden when his breathless wife came running up to him. "See this. There's a letter from the police. It seems our Hugo has a relative who's looking for him." They were all shocked. It turned out that the boy had a very rich grandfather, a well-known industrialist in the capital city. He had a troubled son, a slacker and a bum who died early, and his maiden, Hugo's mother, kept her pregnancy a secret and moved to another town. She was a promiscuous woman herself. She gave birth to a boy, and within 5 years, she died after another binge, and Hugo was left with his stepfather. He didn't know how to deal with another man's child. He was a burden to him, so he treated him badly when he got drunk. His grandfather died to find his grandson to no avail. Suddenly, he got a positive response to the inquiry. Of course, the boy was not against this kind of affinity, and his grandfather's offer to move the capital. Such prospects and opportunities after all. He decided to go to law school. On the one hand, his parents were happy for the boy. He would make it in life. He would become a man. It only hurt that they had to part with him. Judith cried silently so that nobody would see her and took pills for her heart. Matthew was also sad. They devote their whole soul into the boy. They have always been together. How can they live now? But they didn't show it. They cheered their son up so he wouldn't blame himself for anything. "Everything's right, son. You will get a good education. Your grandfather will help you work. What about here? There are no prospects. Just go. Don't hesitate." They saw their son off and sat down on the stoop and began to weep. "Well, my old lady, we're going to spend the rest of our lives together. Our dove flew away. And the man caressed his wife. Never mind, darling, as long as he gets things right. A few years passed. Matthew and Judith could barely manage the household, and their health declined. The man had a bad limp. He couldn't manage without crutches. Judith was often ill. She was old and didn't have the strength to keep the household going. As the big black limousine pulled up to the gate, the old folk thought someone had arrived at the wrong address. The neighbors stepped out to see who the rich guy was. Hugo got out of the car. They couldn't recognize him in a stylish, expensive suit, tall, mature, and fit. Judith gasped, shook her arms, and waddling over to the boy, sobbing, "Hugo's here! My son! I never thought I'd see him again." He hugged his mother tightly, walked over to his father, and shook his hand. "Hi, Father. I missed you so much." There was a large crowd of onlookers gathered around. Hugo said, "Mum, Dad, I've come to get you. I'm taking you with me. I've bought you a cozy flat in a quiet area. There's a clinic and a park nearby, so I'll take care of you and help you. At first, you will go on a holiday and have a rest. You picked me up from the street, brought me up, raised me as a human being. It's time for me to pay my debt as a son. Get your things while I go to school. There's a class reunion, and my dear classmates haven't even invited me. Fortunately, Mrs. Horton, my favorite teacher, called me." All the neighbors looked up and whispered, saying how lucky they were to be in their old age. It was like in the movies. Everyone turned around as a huge black limousine dashingly pulled up to the school gates. Hugo came out with a huge scarlet basket of stunningly beautiful roses, passed his classmates, and presented the flowers to the class teacher. "Mrs. Horton, this is for you, from Hugo. Thank you very much for your knowledge, support, patience, and understanding. It is only thanks to you and my parents that I got to see the end of my exhilarating education." The teacher even teared up. "Hugo, what a handsome man you've become. How are you? Did you get into the institute like you wanted?" "Thank you. I'm doing great. I'm studying law. That's my dream." "Good luck to you." Mrs. Horton wished him luck. The students were whispering, "Who's that? We don't recognize him." Hugo held his head up proudly and said, "Oh, it's me, Hugo, son of a cripple and a bum. Why don't you give a disdainful look and turn away? Or is status, expensive car, and clothes all that matters to you? Oh, you." And without waiting for the silly questions, he got in his car and drove off. Matthew and Judith walked through the shady alleys of Miami between the palm trees and saw the ocean for the first time in their lives, enormous and boundless. They simply could not get the words out of admiration. It seemed to them as if they had died and gone to heaven. Everything was fabulous. Hugo excitedly introduced them to the city, showed them around, and was glad that, at least in their old age, he could make his parents happy, so that they could see another life in their lifetime. Judith hugged her son and told him without hiding her tears, "Hugo, my darling, thank you for everything. You've shown me such beauty. You take care of me. Now I'm not afraid to die." Matthew also maintained pace with his wife, even limping less. "That's a good boy we raised, isn't it, dear?" Hugo smiled. "I keep it all in mind. Even though I was little, if you hadn't been there, I would have died on that heating pipe. This set of soldiers was the most precious and desirable present I ever remembered. And I know what a hard time it was for you, saving your last penny so that I could dress as well as others, buying me a telephone, always taking care of me and understanding me. So thank you. Of course I love my grandfather, but you will always be the closest people to me." Life treats us very harshly at times and presents terrible surprises. But despite all adversities, you must have a kind heart and help your neighbor, not offend the weak, and stay human under any circumstances.